Very good. Welcome back, everyone. My name's Richard Rawlsley. I'm based down in Tasmania, and we'll do Kate in a minute. If I'm feeling nervous, it's because I've got PTSD. Trouble that is, I actually had the painful experience of working with Danny Donaghy for 10 years and travelling and attending conferences, and he's sitting right there. So if there's a bit of nervousness, it's not because of the audience, it's because of Danny. But yeah, Tasmania-based. Knew Danny wasn't Tasmanian-based when he arrived, because if he had the choice of two heads, there's no way he would have chose that one. One back anyway, we'll see how we go. Wow, what a conference though. I think Greg said it very well, to the organising committee, to Kath and all the team. Fantastic job, it's been outstanding. Everyone's shown up. I think when you get to a conference like this, it's about the engagement, and if you look at the level of interaction we've had throughout, from the time the bus arrived on farm at Simon's Place right through to where we are now, it's been outstanding. You, the audience, the farmer panel we've got up here to go through today, all the speakers, outstanding. So again, I know we've been through this, but put your hands together not only for everyone, but yourselves. Fantastic. This is the last session you've got now, so you know what we're wanting here is to be thought-provoking. We've had that all the way along. We want to talk about innovation and practice change, shaping the future, and it's about taking action. You've heard a lot. You've heard from each of the panel members we've got here. So we've got Mark Lambert, we've got Adam Forbes, Kate Merrim, Gillian O'Sullivan, Karanjeet Singh Mahal, and Ray Collins on stage. So thank you all. So coming up, I wasn't expecting to hear all the things that I've heard. I put a list together, and so if we just flick over the slide, I just want to run through some of the things that you've heard throughout the day. I can't do it justice in 10 minutes to go through every speaker. I think you can, recapture everything that people's done will take you half a day. So I just put up a bit of a word graphic there, and I'm sure I've missed some things, but things that I heard throughout: multi-species, functional groups, deeper roots. I like this: profit over production, opportunity, the commercial opportunity, diversity, plant diversity, diversity of microbes, diversity of function, structural diversity. So I think they've got it right up the middle, is it? Yep, good. Design, resilience, demonstration, research. You can't have research without the research finding that the need is more research. Microbes, microbiome, soil health, plant health, human health, chemical, physical, biological properties, all the soil properties, pH, calcium, calcium-magnesium ratios, anaerobic, aerobic. Then we got into things like grazing management, long rotations, residuals, milking frequency. This is for you, Mark, 3 and 2, and others 10 in 7, once a day, which I think is 7 in 7, or 1 in 1. On that, you know that 3 out of every 2 people struggle with fractions, so if you didn't like to laugh at that, we got a fraction joke at the end. We've got a fraction course at the end if you didn't laugh at that one, but anyway, that's all good. Worm counts, decarbonisation, nitrous oxide, nitrate leaching, plantain, biological nitrification, sward dynamics, prostrate and erect. That's probably is a little bit close after Danny's comment. Bucket size, target, the introductions, water use, establishment, just goes on and on. So I know Craig up the back's also got a whiteboard with the same things on it. So this chance in this hour is to go, take that list, everything you've heard, and talk to people who've put it into practice. Their journey has been amazing. We've heard a lot throughout the day, and yesterday on farm, we've seen a lot as well. And so what I want to open up with is certainly to the panel. First of all is to go, what is it that you've taken away from the conference? You're on your journey now, you're a long way into it. You've come here to share your experiences, and I know you're going to get plenty of questions from the floor, and you'll be able to share that learning with them. But what would be the one thing that you might go home right now and do differently? Now, I'll give you 30 seconds to think about that. Now, on the floor, whether you're in research, whether you're in service provider, whether you're farming, whether you're dairy, beef, even sheep, got to mention here from New Zealand. What is it that you would like the panel to help you with? What would be the one thing that you could take from these experience and learn lessons from the panel to go home and help you with your farming system, your journey, to regenerative agriculture, your journey to improve your soil health, your research priorities, or the advice that you want to share with others. So please do that. So I might throw to the panel. Kate, you've got the mic, so I'll jump with you. What have you taken, what surprised you from the conference, and what will you go home tomorrow and people think about and just challenge your thinking?
Okay, when we walk out of here, we have to be hit with the world news, and I have no idea what's happened in the world since we were out there. But one of the things I know is that we're in a really challenging geopolitical time, and we're in a really challenging environmental, ecological time going forward. And we've got to go home and see our teenage and young adult boys and their partners, and they say things to me like, "Mum, to some extent everything's effed, so why does it matter?" And as like the adults in the room and the people with the land management responsibility and the people responsible for managing the industry and government funding to get all this right, a lot is resting on everyone in this room. And for that reason, I think that we really need to take the seriousness of this work for the future of humanity to heart. And we really need to say, I stand up to get this right. This isn't just a maybe I should do it thing. It's I'm prepared to say that I'm going to show up and do my very best to learn the farming systems that will meet the future geopolitical and climate stuff that's coming to us.
Let's go.
Well, I've been doing this for a while, so it's not so much that. So I'm just going to share my next step, which is actually something that you've kind of done a bit as well. So I'm just awaiting on some total soil tests from EAL to work through some of the micronutrients issues that I think are going on the farm. So that's my next step.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, I guess two things. One, I'm incredibly inspired by all the conversations I've had, all the people I've met, and I think it's been a wonderful experience to interact with everyone here, and as I said, really inspirational. But the second thing is that I'm very much motivated to go back. As I said, I'm a complete nerd, so to go back to all of the research, and there's been fantastic research that has been touched on from Massey. Definitely go back to that. The stuff that's been put up there from TIA about their research in multispecies. I'm going to go back and try and take all of that in. And I think because the more informed we are, the better decisions we can make on our own farm in relation to the conditions we're dealing with, in our own that we're farming with, and then drive on our own journey, because we can only do it by owning that knowledge and applying that knowledge to our own farms.
Adam?
Look, it's certainly been so thought-provoking the last couple of days and continues to challenge some conventional thinking. And look, I'll probably go home to our production system and still look at some of the principles that have been discussed that I can move further into this journey while still maintaining probably a high level of cow production. So that's sort of a value of mine that I want to keep as part of our system, but seeing some of the results the last couple of days have certainly been thought-provoking, and I'll continue to work through that system and where it can fit.
Fantastic. Great.
Yeah, for me, I'll go home and continue doing the changes that I've been doing. It's been good to come here and see the science around some of the stuff that I have been doing I haven't really looked at a lot of science about it all. I've just been trial and error and just poking away. And it's been good to see some of the results and the trials and the other conversations.
So just reinforce your thinking and
reinforce the
confidence. And,
I believe that this is only the start. It's farming in the century that we're in. So I don't think it needs to be separated from anything else. I think it's a farming system that we are moving forward into. So I don't think it needs to be serial. I think we just keep poking away at it.
That is fantastic. Thanks, Brett. Yep. Ranger?
We'll also keep going.
Yeah.
By no means are we finished our journey. I don't think anyone's ever finished their journey. But one of the things that really stands out for me is last night's speaker and how amazingly motivated both Brian and I were after listening to him speak, and how you view your own product and what you do differently after listening to someone talk about the value of milk in the way that he did. And if we can do anything to promote how wonderful our product is and the wonderful job that farmers do, then I think we'll do that.
I reckon that deserves a round of applause. That's what we all should be proud to be in a profession, and a noble profession to feed a globe that's growing, and doing it in a way that we want to make the place a better place. So it's worked very well. So as you can see, the rock stars of the conference for sure, the farmer panel. So you've got an hour, and I'm a bit like Darryl Braithwaite of the race course. Okay, I've been not paid to be here, but when I get the mic, I hand it to the audience to do the job for me. So that's what I'm going to do. You know, there's not going to be a lot of singing the horses up here. So I'm going to hand the mic over to the audience to do the work for me. And so let's get a couple of roaming mics and straight down here. Thank you. Yep, Pauline, you're good to go.
Okay.
Oh, you need it there.
I just wondered whether there'd been any consideration for native grasses in the multi-species mix.
Who'd like to take that? Dryland farms maybe? There's a couple of irrigated farms maybe not.
For me, I haven't, no.
The only thing I would say about native grasses, and you know, this is coming from the Irish context, I'd only echo what John Finn said this morning, because what we did is we tried the 7 species mix, and we're like, wow, this is wonderful, let's go for a 19 species mix, and then we went out of our way to find a greater species range and put it in. And the thing is, we put it into the ground, we said it's going to be fantastic, and up it came, and you could see some of those herbs, and they're so delicate, some of these herbs, and you can identify them, and you're looking at yarrow and sheep's burnet and all this type of stuff. But it's gone. That first grazing, it's the stronger species that are going to stay going, so it is going to be primarily your threes, your forbs, your legumes, and your grasses are going to, the dominant ones will dominate. So eventually, that eventually comes very quickly, you're down to those dominant species. So choose the species that are going to be most productive for your land type, soil type, farm type, wherever you are. Choose them wisely, but choose the productive ones. And for me, the lesson I could take is that there's no need to go and go up and up and up and up in species number. Choose the ones that are going to be productive and effective for what you need.
Did anyone want to add to that?
I will. Completely agree. But there's another area of natives that you can incorporate, and that's trees. So grazing trees. You can bring all sorts of native grazing trees into the system, and they nibble on them. You don't have to have it as a big part of it. It just works well.
Yeah, no, I think some good points, and New Zealand's looking at a few natives coming the other day on the bus, so I think it's about understanding what they can provide and what problem they're solving, as we've heard throughout the farmer panel, that selecting species and their function to solve issues and create a better future. So we'll throw it back to the floor. Yes, down, up Lucy.
Thank you all for your presentations and honesty and just being here sharing your knowledge. There's a number of us here who are representing businesses, and we're not necessarily either the primary or the sole decision maker, and we're not necessarily representative of the whole business kind of mode of operation. We're here because we're curious, or we might have interests that don't necessarily align with the business. In your experience, I guess I'm curious to understand, short of, say, a major health event or some sort of major realignment of perspective, when you've spoken to other farmers about what you're doing on farm, what's been the sort of common trigger points that have maybe triggered a bit of curiosity with people to challenge their thinking, or how do we take some of this stuff back home and have conversations as part of the businesses that we're in, where we're not necessarily both aligned or all aligned in our sort of way forward?
Cool. Good. Mark, you got Mike?
Yeah, I'll answer that from the side for a little bit. So, like fail-safe trial work is it's a really good way to say, can we give this a try, see if it works, and you can do a little plot, and you'll have to fence it differently because it needs to get grazed differently, but a good way to get into it and see how it works in your situation.
I would say to start with the problem. You know, there's a good why there. Why am I putting it in? I'm putting it in to solve a problem, a particular problem. So if there's somebody who does not have an issue with drought, then, you know, or doesn't have an issue with drainage or whatever, that there's no reason for them to put it in. But if you could discuss and have a common reason for them to put it in, then you can only build on that conversation and move forward with it. That there's an excellent reason why to do it. But it can be a hard sell. And anybody in our discussion group, they said, you know what, we'll let you guys make that experiment and see how you turn out. And we're always happy to experiment.
Yeah, and I guess it's just getting out on farm, like even within our own discussion group, we're probably out on a limb as far as what we're doing with our pastures, and if you turn up at the right time of year, like say for example going to a mixed species farm down here currently, it's pretty easy to see which farm is potentially positioned better. So I think it's just having a look at those systems at the right time and finding farmers that are willing to open the gate and share, have a look at some plants and some soil and kick a few stones.
I agree with that. Like last year we probably had probably 12 to 15 different groups coming through our farm, and not groups, like some of them were just farmers and their family coming through having a look at what we do.
Yeah, Karen,
I think a problem can be a way of starting the process, but I think it's finding out your why. What is the reason each person in that business is there? What do they want to achieve from that business? And then does this pathway meet what they need? Because if you don't have a reason to do it, you're not going to do it. So, and it doesn't have to be a negative reason, it can be a positive reason. So what is it that each person wants to achieve through the business? Can you contribute to that through a new pathway?
I might throw to the audience again.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh. Sorry, Bradley. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, look at the science and look at the sustainability of some of the issues that we have in the past, and look at some of the stuff we've talked about the last couple of days, and put them against each other and really focus and maybe do the experiences on your own place and pick out 2 or 3 of your worst paddocks and think, how can I make them better? And do the trials. And
We'll push on.
Yeah, several of the speakers mentioned the importance of micronutrients. I'd just like to emphasise there's some really good lot of plant tests available for monitoring micronutrient levels that maybe are not being widely used. They've been published in a book by CSI Rome's about 2 inches thick. It really covers all the critical levels for micronutrients and for major nutrients from the range of pastures, from tropical to temperate pastures across the whole of Australia. So maybe we need to revisit that.
I might throw to Kate, because I know Kate's done a fair bit of testing on your farm on nutrients and nutrient balance. So.
Thanks for that contribution. I'm not aware of that 2 inches, but I'll have a look for it. I think when you've got, say, boron deficiency, and you hit it, right at the time when you need it, it seems extraordinary the response you can have. And you've seen that too, haven't you, Mark?
The panel's running.
Yeah, we've been sharing ideas. So, we actually put a bore down. This one was dry, as it happened, and it brought up some sandy clay from down fairly deep, and it brought it up on top of our red soil. And it's like, that's not going to grow a thing, that stuff. And well, I'll tell you one thing it did grow. It grew really well, and it grew a heap of 4-leaf clovers, which are a good sign of high boron levels. And I got that sandy clay tested, and it came back as almost useless, but it did come back with high boron levels. So, interesting.
Gillian, you're running your own laboratory at your farm by the look of the pictures, and the family's all involved, and so, yeah, what sort of, and you put up some great results of the testing you've done, and obviously tracking that over time. How valuable has that been, and how's that, what we can take away as an audience?
So the testing that we do fairly regular is our pH, our P and K status, because that's what everybody works with, and because pH is your master variable for getting nutrients into most available, plant available, when they're in the right range, and especially having that right range for clover establishment. The other tests that we did were for the trace minerals and for the organic carbon. Like, those tests are incredibly expensive, but it just so happened that the government ran a program and said, we'll test all your farm for nothing. It's just a program, we'll subsidise it. And we said, you just, unfortunately, you wait a year for the results, but they got there in the end. And but it was great to get those type of results, because again, we probably won't repeat them for maybe 5 or 10 years, but at least this gives us a baseline to start with, and now we know if we're going in the right direction in the next while, especially with organic matter and our trace. And the thing is, with the trace elements, it's, like Kate was saying, they've just started in the last 2 years. I think we're just at that level, so we've started with seaweed, but I think we need to probably up our game a little bit around getting and somebody mentioned about tissue testing. That's another thing we're going to look at, because again, to send off for tissue testing, you need to be using the right lab, and for us that lab is in like the Netherlands or something. So it's about, it certainly is important, and when it comes to, but yeah, the important message is knowing your baseline and moving on from there with it.
Sorry, Johnny. Just with that, did the government use those results for general public good, and did they advise the lab they have to use, or was it just I'll help you, Johnny, and then
Yeah, so it was like an extensive soil health program. Did they use it for good? There's always a little bit of cynicism around that, so yes, they did use it for good.
Very good, sorry, Kate.
So I think one distinction that's really valuable to make is the difference between soil testing for micronutrients and plant tissue testing for micronutrients. And I think we're much better served to test the plant tissue or the plant sap. And in Australia at the moment, I have the sense that the ranges we're given for, was that enough boron or not, is really based on the total number of samples they've tested. Are you in the top, middle or bottom of that, rather than is this enough for absolutely flourishing plant growth? And so maybe that's something that can be taken on board, is to really help us get to a situation where for pasture plants used in Australia, we know the tissue levels that are for flourishing plant growth rather than the average of everything that's ever been sent in.
Thanks, Kate. On the other end of the panel.
It's interesting, Brian and I were actually talking about this at the table back there just earlier, that you shouldn't discount anything. You should be as open-minded as you possibly can be. And he was relating an experience with Tony Donnelly, I think it is, from New Zealand, and his own journey with micronutrients on the farm that he was on in New Zealand. And the difference it made, applying micronutrients, that a very sticky soil became nutty and far more productive just through the application of micronutrients the following year. The changes were that quick. So include everything, be really, really open-minded. It's important to look at all the available information.
And some people are using plant bricks as a way to say, well, was this the right thing at the right rate? So perhaps you might put on some manganese or put on some copper or something in a foliar form, test the bricks before and after, and if the bricks is rising quite quickly or is higher where you've put it as little as an hour after the application, then it's saying actually that was limiting to the plant and there's some value to put that in. And for a lot of farmers that's really valuable because it's very expensive and there's a time lag when you're trying to do tissue testing to make a decision about a foliar application of nutrients, and that can be a quick and dirty, I think I'm in the right direction.
Someone had a question down front.
I had a question. So, not a farmer, but I'm a scientist. So, I wanted to ask, when we do our research, we do it at all different levels. So, we've done the research that we spoke about yesterday, and we worked very closely with Dairy Australia and speaking to the farmers we worked with to make sure that that was something that was going to answer questions that farmers might have. But we also want to know what's happening, like why are we seeing those things. So we work at a very micro level to understand some of these processes as well, which we tend to not report as widely because perhaps they don't have such a practical thing. So I'm just curious if you, and you guys have all talked about how you go and see your friends and what other people are doing to learn what to do. So I'm curious to know how you use the scientific research that comes out. Are you interested in the things that we've presented now that are more farm-based? And are you also interested in, do you use resources of things that are more on the micro scale, like the details of what's happening with the roots and things like that?
Actually, I'll start with this one because yes, we do. Brian and I both have a bit of a science background, who's more extensive than mine, and a lot of the research that we did that informed our decision making when we started on this journey was from Brian's experience as a Lincoln graduate. But also,
you'd hardly call it experience.
but also because he farmed in a couple of different countries and had applied science to his farming practices. And so yes, when we went looking for information, we did look at that sort of thing because that's our background, that's the way we think, and it's valuable. But so is looking over the fence. We have an issue in our family that if Brian's driving, sometimes the car goes over the white line because he's so busy looking at that farmer's paddock and what the heck that farmer's doing. And that's really, really important. All farmers learn from other farmers, and so the more we can share our experiences as farmers, the better, because it's so valuable.
Yeah, for me, the same, but I like to see it simple. Make it simple and share the story simply so that I can understand it. And some of the stuff goes straight over the top of my head, but 2 or 3 times it sinks in, and if it's in a simple form, it works well for me.
Helen, I'd like to know where I can go and look that up and look up the full depth of it, because there could be a day when I think, hey, I wonder what happened with the roots there. Yeah, so I think this is actually an issue right across the dairy industry, that we don't have a great way of cataloguing all the research. We certainly don't have a way of making sure that farmers can access that catalogued research unless they're enrolled in university and have an academic access. We can't see it, so unless we know the person to ask, you know, personally, please can I have a copy of your report? And there's a broader ethical issue, who paid for it, surely we should all have access to it. So yeah, setting that up so that we can, in perpetuity, see all of the research that we funded, that would be great.
Other questions from the floor? From Lucy? Oh.
I was happy if you want to keep going.
Oh, sorry.
I was just curious, there's a little bit of chat yesterday around animal health benefits that have been seen, but for those probably who have got more of their farm in the multi-species mixes, are you seeing a certain type of cow that sort of system is starting to select for, or are you starting to move towards a certain type of cow?
I think our results are a little bit confounded by the fact we also changed our farming system, so we went once a day partway through this journey as well. But I think we were already seeing fatter, happier cows. And it's interesting when you watch them go into, say, we've got a paddock behind our house called the fruit salad paddock, and it's been there for ages, and it's just got everything in it, and it all varies depending on what soil types and what part of the paddock. They don't just, you know how when you put cows into a ryegrass paddock, they just mow it. They don't do that in that paddock. They graze and they pick at certain things at certain times, and they might then sit down and rest and then go back and pick a whole lot of different plants. And that just feels better. I don't know what the science is behind that, but you see them behaving differently in their grazing. And in the shed, because I'm the one that's in there daily with the cows, I think they're more content, and that makes a difference to me.
I would 100% agree with that. In my experience too. But the thing is, like, once you start changing some of these things, you start changing way more than just one thing, and so it gets a bit lost in all the changes.
Anyone else? Yep.
I was only going to say that certainly for me, the same as I think things have improved, you definitely don't get the nitrate problems. They haven't had nitrate problem for years, so cows are healthier, happier, definitely easier to work with. So yeah, I'd say yes, but there's obviously no evidence around it.
Adam, you've got different cow type?
Yeah, I'd say that, probably made the comment to a couple of people in the last couple of days, that I think it's a fairly exciting time still to be a Holstein breeder, because we're lucky that you can choose a type of cow that's still suited to a grazing system, that you've got a small stature, high testing, good health traits, and that's been a direction we've headed in for the last 10 years as well. So again, multiple things changing in the system at one time, and we probably have tried to design this system to still suit that larger, high-producing type of cow, but not, again, going fully down the road of that conserved fodder feeding, like I mentioned earlier in the presentation.
Yep. Kathy was going to say.
Yeah, Lucy, we've still got 3 bays on our farm that are conventionally managed and get urea on them. And the last time we did a tissue test, there was a 5-fold higher nitrate level in the conventional compared to the regen bays. And one of our sons reports that that's incredibly detrimental to the milking experience. Yeah, when the cows are on those bays. Yeah, and of course we all know that if they always had the high nitrate feed, they would be more adapted to it, and that there would be less of that experience for him.
One thing is that over time, when we've reduced our nitrogen usage, we haven't, like, some of our clover products have like over 50% clover at times of the year. We haven't had a single case of bloat. I'm going to have to touch wood there on that or something, just to, not jinx myself. But we haven't had a case. We're not putting bloat oil in. We're managing it so that. So I feel like cow health is really, really good. One thing that they do eat now is docks. When you pull back on your nitrogen, docks are more palatable, and they mow down docks, so that's less of an issue. And then the other thing, then, and I mentioned it yesterday, that when they go down the hills on our place, if there's ryegrass there and it's had 10 days of dry weather, now you've got stem and starting, that stress-looking ryegrass is starting to put up a seed head. Cows don't want to actually eat that at all. And when they're going into a field of multi-species, they're far more happy and comfortable and satisfied when they go in there, as opposed to walking into a field of kind of semi-stressed ryegrass and then just walk down to the end, going back to the top, and just standing there bawling for the rest of the day. So, and especially as a vet, I have no issues with, for health issues with cows. I don't see it as being a negative thing.
Yeah, you go ask. Yep.
I'll pass.
Yeah.
What's the craziest thing you've ever tried or planning to try?
On the farm.
Well, I think Pete gave you a bit of an outline of when we completely pumped out one of our irrigation reuse ponds and it was full of carbon. I couldn't bear to waste that potential amino acid source. And so I started Googling how do you make a fish hydrolysate, and every single recipe said how important it was to cut the fish up finely. But in their demonstrations, they all used their household blender. And I don't know about your houses, but we have a lot of milkshakes, and I was not going to make our milkshake make it taste like carp. So I tried a whole lot of ways to gut up carp quickly, and ended up not doing it and just deciding that I was making carp sauerkraut, which meant I weighed the carp down so they were submerged, and that worked beautifully.
There you go. Tasted delicious, apparently. Julian, craziest thing you've done on farm?
It turns out the cave is just a cold, dark killer, and she wins there, so.
Anyone else want to add? Oh, Mark, you've obviously got a story.
But which one?
Of the craziest thing you've done on farm.
So, most of you have to block your ears for this one, but so we've put on 300 kilos of sea salt, or Himalayan rock salt, over the farm. Like we're in Tassie, we don't have a salt problem at all. We've actually got the opposite problem. It's not enough salt, not enough sodium in our soil. So people talk about chlorine as being a big bad thing in the fertiliser. It must be more the chemical makeup of that potassium chloride. But salt, fantastic stuff as fertiliser for us.
Yeah. Yeah. Just one thing. So the question was, what about it?
We actually tried table salt versus sea salt and bricks and things, and so we actually raised the bricks in our plants with sea salt, but we raised it like 4 times the amount, like a lot, with the sea salt or Himalayan rock salt over the normal salt.
Karen G?
I think and Jade's going to laugh at this, but we put in a mix, and these plants started coming out with these really unusual looking flowers that we didn't sort of expect to see. And Brian said to me, you know, he picked one of these flowers, brought it home and said, "Do you know what this is?" And I said, "No, I don't know what it is either. But something's obviously contaminated our seed mix. And we might have to get the kids, and we might have to walk the paddocks and pull out every plant." And fortunately, he actually dropped into where we buy our seed and said, "Well, this is what we're getting." And they said, we include that deliberately. That's for Celia and it's for the bees.
Fantastic. Very good. I think we've got a question up the back.
Hello, I was just going to say, most of the people in this room are probably like early adopters. I was just wondering if you could share your like top tip or the first step maybe for other farmers in the industry that are wanting to move into multi-species pastures, and like what's the best thing that you learned along the process?
Fantastic question. We'll start your own.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll go back to what I said yesterday, which is sit down and have a conversation, make the decision, know why you're making the decision and what you want to achieve. We now have business meetings over breakfast where we discuss farm decisions. We've come a long way, and that's you talking about it starts your brain thinking, whether you realise it or not. You're actually starting to gather and process information in your head, even if it's not consciously. And so you've already started as soon as you sit down and talk about the potential of that decision.
Right.
Yeah, mine would be just set 2 or 3 challenges, understand what you want, pick the first 2 or 3, focus on them, do them well, deliver, and then build from that.
Fantastic.
Yeah, be the same, just identify the why and be flexible to change. Like, we've got it wrong plenty of times. We haven't got it wrong, but we haven't got it quite right either, and it's just saying, well, what can we change next time, and just continue building from that. But I think no matter where you start, you'll probably be in a better position than where you were previously. But just doing it in incremental step changes and not going a shotgun approach is probably the advice I'd have.
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, like, just figure out where your farm compass is pointing, because it's the why that gets you there. And oftentimes, when you think of what factors into the why, it is those big things that impact on your farm profitability, because that's essentially where your farm farm compass is going to be pointing. So I think oftentimes when you see the big picture stuff and you really drill into the nitty gritty, as opposed to just looking over the ditch and saying, oh, they're doing that, we should do that. Make decisions for your own farm, based on your own farm soil type, and make those decisions and own them. And then you'll realise that decision making will lead you down, with whatever pathway it does. But oftentimes that's when we did that and we reassessed and reevaluated what we needed to do, multi-species became part of our why. So that's where you need to start really, is find your why, like everybody else is saying, and give it a go, but don't go all guns blazing. Start, little steps first.
Thought I had at least another half second. A really great quick and dirty tool that can be done anywhere, even in the dust on the dashboard, is a bit of a SWOT analysis of, and it can be like this paddock, or it could be this business, but as a way to say, let's just do a quick stock take of what we're looking at here, and then, you know, when you've done your quick SWOT analysis, that will tell you what's the place of perhaps multi-species in answering the questions for this. So if we do a one paddock SWOT analysis, you'll know quickly, you know, what are your constraints in that paddock, what are your opportunities, what are the things you're looking out for. Yeah, and that can be just a quick, easy, on the fly to get started.
Fantastic. Throw to the floor, anyone? Yep. Thanks, Jack.
Just one of the watch-outs for us, I reckon, and don't get me wrong, I'm very supportive of this. Let's try it before we know how it works. But processors will have a very low tolerance for new things. They're really risk-averse and conservative and those sort of things. And so, and you ask them what sort of milk you want, and they go, I want exactly the same as yesterday, right? So as we go through this change process, I think we'll have to just check in with them and say, look, downstream from some of our trial farms, let's do some sampling and look at what the variation in that looks like and make sure that they don't get surprised, right? I think that's all it is. I don't see any problems here, but let's not create one where there isn't one by surprising them, going, oh, look, we've got something new or something where the tolerances were here that have gone up, particularly if they're putting it into things like nutritionals and things like that, that will have quite tight tolerances. So I think there's just some work to do to get in front of that so it doesn't hold us up. I don't think it's unsolvable at all, but I wonder whether any of you had experience in that conversation.
I know that when we were growing up, Dad started to use maize in his system. And as kids, I mean, obviously most of us would probably drink milk from the vat. We stopped drinking the milk. It tasted so bad. So, the milk company back then, and it was NZCDC back then, before it became something else, they didn't have a problem with it, but I tell you what, it tasted like crap. That is now a conventional practice. So I don't think that what we're doing when we're having a mixed sward is going to have as much of an impact on what you're putting in the vat as a change that we all take for granted now, which was feeding maize. So, yeah, maybe think about it, but I'm not sure that it's going to be as much of a risk as you might think.
Anyone else want to comment?
I think the same experience with turnips when people first started sowing a lot of turnips in my recollection is in the 90s, and the conversation around milk change, and then the factories telling us it wasn't like farmers would notice it, but they weren't noticing it in terms of quality. But Jack, I definitely take on board that that's a really important point. But beyond that, actually, we would like to know to what extent are we improving the nutritional value of that milk and the manufacturing properties and, the saleability of it.
I think it highlights the importance of working together about those things. Julian, did you want to just touch on the Irish experience with, products and regenerative products coming into this?
Yeah, all I'd say is that there's very little. There's farmers adopting it and adopting multi-species swards, and again the government has supported that, and they've had a multi-species sward program where the seed was paid for in order to get X number of hectares in multi-species swards across all commercial, as many commercial farms as they could do. So it's been supported to a degree, but I don't think there's enough of it there to make any sort of an impact on what's going into milk processors. The only thing I would say is that there, in terms of research around grass-based milk production, there's wonderful science that came out of Moore Park or Teagasc about 12 months ago, showing that the nutritional composition of grass-based milk production versus TMR-based milk production is far superior. You can tell it through colour, taste, and in the nutritional profiles. And that's such an excellent story for anybody who's producing grass-fed milk products. But again, as farmers, we're not sharing that story half enough. Like, it's a huge win for us. And the more of that, I feel like the more of that type of research that comes out, the better it will be for grass-based producers.
I don't think it stops at the farmer telling that story. You know, we're all in the supply chain and the need of that. Brad, I'm sorry. Okay.
I was going to more say the same thing.
Okay. Yeah. Following down.
So I have a couple of 20-something-year-olds, and I was thinking about the 5-second attention span that you've got to grab the consumer. What might you say about your product that would grab their attention?
Please talk about they fall into that.
A big campaign at home would be that the rugby team, they have lots of the bigger important players that are involved in the rugby team, because some of them have farming links, and they're involved in promoting milk as one of the most beneficial recovery drinks after sport. And that is huge. Like the amount of young lads that are there and they're coming out of the gym, and I know all these protein shakes are massive at the minute, but that are going getting milk and drinking 500 mils of milk is like it's a big one that they buy into.
So maybe muscle on the label.
Very high quality protein. Yeah.
Right.
But also, like what Matthew Evans said yesterday, blind taste testing. Like you can't measure these differences, but we can taste them.
Yeah. Okay. So better measure that.
And also, how many proteins are in a milk replacement compared to actual real milk? What was the difference?
Or just maybe TikTok on how to do this.
3. We'll go to the audience again. I'll throw if we haven't, if I could. No, you're right. Not a lot on grazing management, but there was a couple of comments around about, getting that balance right between allowing the species diversity to express itself and managing then the impact it might have on the milk vat. Just give you a story about how you found that right balance, because really what you're defining is the grazing rules for these species, so you're in front of the curve. We've done a lot of work on conventional species and monocultures around grazing management, but what are the grazing rules that comes to managing mixed species? What's your learnings? And what's the gaps as well? Not sure if that works.
So one of the biggest things for me is actually changing how you think about it, because it's so messy. Like it's just so different to look across those paddocks, and it's like, if I looked at them 15 years ago, it's like, what a mess of a farm that I've got today. Because everything's a different height. Here we are used to looking at a manicured ryegrass, and it looks really good, actually. And we've just got this great mess across the landscape, but then you go and look at it and you look at that chicory in flower, look at the bees hanging around it. It's just incredible, all the flowers that are going on, all the activity that's going on around that. And then you sort of put the cows in there and you sort of watch them, because you can watch them, like before they just go eat ryegrass, right? But now they choose what they want to eat, and it's just so different. You spend a lot more of your time watching all these things that are new to us.
I didn't really change. I didn't really change things. I always focused on production and profit. I knew there was going to be a gap, so I thought, how can I fill that gap? And that's when I started growing maize. So I grew the maize to give me some security on that gap through the autumn, winter, and spring. So no, I didn't change, but I still run a fairly short rotation. Probably the difference that I have, I change carbon pattern to calf every March, so those paddocks get rested at the end of, and they still get ugly, but the dry cows, I'll just split the cows up on 10 to a paddock, and they seem to clean it up on their dry period, and it comes back fresh and ready to go again.
So that changing carbon pattern was to address the need, the different growth pattern of the plant? And
no, it wasn't. It was I want to go fishing in general.
Fantastic, like the honesty.
Richard, can I just interject for a second? I need to extract Adam out of the panel because it's time for him to depart.
for the discussion. Didn't know you was that dodgy, Greg, but all the best, Adam. Thank you. We'll keep going. Karen G, your grazing experience.
Look, Brian's the feeding expert, but he will say to me, can you just see how they are when they come in the morning? Because if they're rushing, I let him know, and then he knows that he's got to correct that in the next grazing, or if he hasn't said that to me and they're rushing and being a pain in the neck loading, then I tell him. But I think even before we started on this journey, Brian used to move them from one place to the next. Like, they didn't sort of have one feed after each milking or anything. They might move 3-4 times a day because it depended what was growing where and how he balanced their diet. So in a sense, the way we do things hasn't really changed. So Brian's much more focused on what the cow needs rather than what's convenient or what's next. There's no formula to it. It's more about what the cow needs.
There's a feedback loop. You're seeing what the cows are doing and you're doing that. Kate, your experience, because you've got some paddocks there that are still conventional, and how that differs in the management?
So one of the things we're really focused on is when we sow a new multi-species crop and when it's got a lot of annuals in it, we are really wanting that to do a job for the soil. And so we're not so focused on when's the perfect time to graze that for the cows, but when's the most effective time. So my understanding is during the annual's life cycle, it's pumping a lot of carbon out through the roots and feeding the microbes. And as soon as that annual plant becomes reproductive, it says, switch off that tap, I'm saving my energy for the seed. So we use that as a bit of a guide to say, well, that plant is fully expressed, it's done its job for the soil, I'm going to graze it now. And kind of the agreement we have is we normally have peas in the mix, whether it's a summer mix, a spring sown mix or an autumn sown mix. And so peas has been an easy plant indicator species to say, okay, let's graze soon, we've got to pea flowering. But additionally, once we have the perennial pastures in, when you go to graze the paddock, if you think that some of the species that you really want to hold on to in that pasture are not quite ready for grazing, we will skip a whole round. So say it's a time when it's quite critical for chicory or for lucerne, or some they're the main ones, or even the plantain, that we might want to really give a bit more opportunity to be dominant in the sward. They're just being perfectly happy, so skip this paddock, give it another round, and so that plant has the opportunity to get away. And
yeah, fantastic. Mark, did you just want to touch on that?
I'm just going to add a little hint. Right, it's not really quite relevant here. So one of the first things we did was to plant our multi-species in our hay paddocks. And so that way we actually got to, as we baled that hay and fed it out across the farm, we actually got to spread that seed across the farm. And a nice little trick.
Well, you've got to get on the bus at 3 o'clock. We've got a few, have we got a few things on stage to go, so how many minutes we got?
If it includes your wrap-up, you've got 5 minutes.
I think we'll go with the floor, as I said, it's better to hear from the floor. Other questions? John?
The comment is that for those people who are interested in looking at any levy-funded research reports from at any stage in the last 25 years, they're all available on the DA library site, which you can get to straight off the website. So it's just Kate, in response to what you said before. The question is one of, I might have missed this in the last day and a half. Has anyone got any rules of thumb they use for if they want a certain proportion in their multi-species mix? Do they go on weight of seed? Do they go on number of seeds per kilo of seed? What's the rule of thumb you use? It might have been mentioned, but I can't recall in the last 2 days.
yeah, we're definitely using number of seeds rather than weight of seed. Yeah, and the other thing we would do is if say we're trying to increase the forks or lucerne, or we would do a spring sowing for that when it's more likely to be competitive. But if we're trying to top up the grasses, we do an autumn sowing of that. So it's it's not just the seeding rate, it's also the time of the year that you can have the biggest influence on changing the composition.
I would second the time of year because we actually just buy like a seed mix, but depending on the time of year you plant it, depends what germinates the most. Quite a big difference there.
I might, in the interest of time, just wanted to do a couple of quick reflections at the start. Particularly, I know James Mann had a big influence on putting this together, and I think he'd be really rough with how the last few days go. But he set out a challenge at the front, which was to embrace diversity, embrace the farming practices that we do, learn from each other, think outside of the convention, decouple productivity from its environmental impacts, and encourage us to think about learning from each other. Focus on that, and failure is okay. At the end of the day, with Kate and Pete, I really love the bumps along the way, the BAM they're using, and then about having fun. So I want to finish with the audience, like, you've been on this journey, but what's been the most fun thing you've got? And what's the most learning thing out of that you can share with the audience to take away, to wrap up? We must start at then, guaranteed.
The most important thing we've learned is that the word FAIL, F-A-I-L, stands for first attempt in learning, because we've had a few of those, and
we're getting that on a t-shirt.
No, really important. So first attempt in learning.
Fantastic.
Mine's simple, just that I love being a dairy farmer again.
Oh, that is great.
I would second that. It makes every day so incredibly interesting and hugely rewarding when you see something work out. Like, you wouldn't believe what a feeling it is when you go out and see a field and you manage to receive it properly, or it's holding up in dry conditions, or you dig and you see lots of dung beetles or earthworms. Like, you're moving in the right direction. So incredibly rewarding from that aspect.
How can I add to those two? But so I add slightly differently. So my kids, they're used to what we do, and we go around to other farms. It's like, why aren't they doing that? Like, our farm, it's amazing how our farm grows. And you go around other places, it's like, oh, the cows have just got ryegrass to eat. How boring is that?
Okay, last word on fun and things that people can take away.
I just feel like our hearts are filled with joy again to see how nature is responding to our collaboration, rather than the struggle to dominate nature to have exactly what our small mind thinks is the ideal happen. And nature is so kind and generous and helpful when you wake up and work out what nature's trying to do, and you just nudged a bit. So the first time that we worked out that we'd used only 20 kilos of nitrogen to grow 12 tonnes of feed, and nature had provided the rest. What a joyous gift. And there must be another 100 joyous gifts we've been given along the way that I'm not even aware of. And yeah, that's nice.
Lovely. I think we'll wrap it up there. I can't add any more to how fantastic the panel's been. Put your hands together.
Richard, you've got a bit of a summary for us.
A little bit, Greg, yeah. So let's kick off with just what we sort of covered a little bit in day one. So a couple of take-homes, again, put on a t-shirt, put on a fridge magnet. Greg Collins, from high input farming to low profit farming. Fantastic take-home message. Jake Holland talked about it's about telling your farm story, transparency and being proactive, identify the win-wins. Laura talked about the focus has shifted, and from animal welfare is no longer a wow factor. But sustainability is now where we're heading, and how important that is to capturing value. Lynn, give a history of organic matter and being the key, the health of mix of plants, healthy microbial community, importance of soil health, focusing on biodiversity. We've heard so much from Kate and Pete, and I think the key underlining bit is that they've taken a fantastic science approach to their work. They've got virtually a replicated full study going on in real time, moving away from high nitrate to low nitrate to high sugar, avoiding anaerobic conditions, better health, less pesticides, less fertilisers, boosting ecological and financial outcomes. So, and the verification I thought was fantastic. Then we went into our international researchers, Dr. Danny Donaghy and James Hills from Tasmania. They shared their insights from farmland research, and I think it's really critically important that we can move. Component studies are important for our understanding, but then to be able to move and test that in a whole farm systems, and what I do like is that, you know, embracing that the farmers can come and have input to what we do as part of those studies is really critical, so that's great. Simon Scott, obviously as part of the farm tour, but again, the message that came through loud and clear was profit over production. Life choices, milking waste once a day, embracing multi-species, simplifying his journey, but he's gone from no profit to profit. I think that's important. We then heard from the better half from New Zealand in Lucy Burkett, nitrogen leaching, team bonding over soil sampling. That's an activity that everyone can come and join. Lucy, I know it must be hard with Danny to get people to work with you, but because things don't go to plan. But then also the insights into nematodes. So again, exciting stuff. Highlighted some really great work, particularly around understanding lost pathways through nitrate leaching. We had Karen G. The why, I think, you know, if anyone takes any message away from today, it's come through really loud and clear. Focus on your why, start small, and then learn from those learnings and build on your successes. Cam give us an insight into his impulsive decision making. I think my wife could take some tips when she goes online from Cam to just work through a few things. I did today actually, I went through it, went for my breakfast, they went through the whole lot, I come up with a score of 205 that said for my health it would be good to get a yoghurt and a cereal. I walked out of the bakery with a sausage roll, an egg and bacon pie and a milkshake. But anyway, he did talk about the heart being important as well, Greg. So and the gut. And the gut. Exactly right. So that was good, but no, it was a good exercise that Cam covered off. So the balance there around the heart, head and the gut was a good message. Great science we heard from Anna in terms of designing multi-species mixtures, some really exciting results understanding functional groups, and I think if we think about some of the things we heard around particularly just not solving the need around yield, but also some of the environmental things and some exciting results with the enteric methane coming through as well, so that was great. We had Jen highlighting how critical it is to have producer demonstration sites, and you know, there's a little bit of discussion on the panel of how we build a network of people involvement, so I think this is a great first step of what's in the room. And if I take one message, you know, get home, encourage the farming community that probably also are conventional about opportunities and learnings to come to an event like this. I know this is probably one of the first things that have been put on the agenda, and it's a credit to the initiative that was put forward, and I think, you know, from James and the whole team behind that, James Mann and the whole team, how can we go back to our regions and share what we've learned and encourage more to come along? So I think, you know, that was really important. We then kicked into day two. Did you want to do day two, or? Yeah, well, look, keep going, or we have a couple of we got to get on the bus. But John, I thought John came up with a good saying when you're on mute is like, oh shit. I think we've all had that moment. But what great work coming out of Ireland. Highlighted legumes as a key driver, emphasising their role, and he reinforced that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So, you know, what we're talking there of 1 + 1 = 3. So again, get your maths right there, but it's certainly the benefit that we want. Heard from Damien highlighting the importance of diverse mixed designs, noting overlaying simplified systems and underperforming. Identify where you're going to get those benefits, and I thought he did a fantastic wrap up of a lot of stuff, and he talked about, you know, bucket size, increasing the bucket size. Eleanor, you know, having that underlying understanding of a plant like plantain and the role that it can improve, that science is just critical when we're making selections. We had Adam, who's, you know, as he talked about, you know, he's doing great production with his cows, but he's seen the need to continue to solve problems, learn from that, emphasise some of the milk production, precision ways to reduce his reliance and enhance soil structure. So very good. And then Jade gives some great practical wrap-ups of how do we establish pastures. So there's a lot of take-homes, and then we finished off, there was a bit of repeat. Obviously, Gillian's given us so much. We heard from Pauline what great examples we've had throughout the demonstrations, throughout the days with that. We also had Angela with the great work that AgVic are doing in terms of spectral monitoring and the tools that can actually help us understand some of this. And then, again, I think it was great to have Kate and the whole panel wrap up. So that's the deal, Greg. We're out of here. Get on your bus if not. So take care. Thank you, Richard.